Everyone, nice to see you again. We have a nice little crowd tonight. It's great, great. Before I begin, I want to make an announcement. Some of you might know that I'm on the Dove Radio here locally. I go on there about once a month. And, when I was at Trail Christian Fellowship, a pastor there, I do 3 or 4 workshops a year. And this particular workshop in 2 weeks, I'm going to do right at the Dove, live at the Dove. And I do a training. You'll get a flyer after the service, but it's called Understanding Personality Differences in the Workplace and Home. Of course, none of you have differences in your personality at home or wherever you go. None of you. So I do a 3-hour training. And we have this on the flyer for you. It'll be at the podium on your way out.
Yes.
Where you will take, actually, if you go to the training, you'll get a personality profile that you take and fill out with you. And then you bring it back. It's Saturday morning, 9 till noon, November 2nd. So in a week and a half. And it's going to be at the Dove Radio, okay?
It's 2070 Milligan Way.
2070 Milligan Way, yeah. And
It's by the airport, yeah.
it's near the airport, 27 Milligan Way. And we can probably get 50, 60 people. I think we're up around past 40 now. And it is, it's 25 for a couple and 15 for a person. And I tell you what, I do many workshops, but this is my favorite for sure. For a couple reasons. First of all, we're talking about the way God wired us. And let's just take marriage for example. When he tells the husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church, sacrifice for her and love her like Christ did. Well, that's a sacrifice. And it's not natural. It's not natural. Our capacity to love our wife like Christ loved the church comes from the Lord. The Holy Spirit gives us the grace to learn how to do that. So there's hope, ladies. There is hope. Because we want to know how to do that. Well, when the Bible tells wives to submit is the word, and for many people that's not a very good word because it's misused. I like the word respect better, it makes more sense. They tell the wives to respect their husbands. Well, that's not natural either. It takes effort at times, especially if your husband doesn't feel respectable. Just like we're supposed to love our wives when they don't feel lovable. So the Lord, it's almost, I got to talk to him when I get there. Although there's no marriage in heaven, it won't matter anymore. But it's amazing how he brings male, female. By the way, there's only 2. Yes, say amen, everybody. Amen. And all you have to do, it just dawned on me the other day, is just look at the animal kingdom. Like, there's not 3 types of genders in the animal kingdom, and neither is there for people. Hello? Isn't that sad that I have to explain that? So anyway, the Lord put male, female together, polar opposites. Like the only thing we have in common, male and female, is that we have 2 eyes, a nose, 2 arms, a leg. What'd you say? Ears. And women have a tendency to hear better than we do. Let me throw that in while we're at it. And, we might live, hopefully, if you're married, you live under the same roof. We have the same kids in many cases. That's about where it ends. Everything else is different. So isn't it interesting that the Lord would give us a polar opposite person to live with the rest of our life and learn how to understand them? Well, it's not natural. In case you haven't learned that already. But it takes sacrifice and grace. So you ask God, why would you put us together? We're so polar opposites. Why? He wants to teach us the love of Christ, which is sacrificial. That's one reason. Because it's not natural. Okay? Then, if that wasn't enough, we have our backgrounds. We're all raised differently. That's usually a problem in all marriages. You know, someone's raised in a home where it's very strict. Another one's raised in the home where, you know, anything went. And then you get married. Or one was raised in a home where, you know, parent was very easygoing. Another one was raised in a home where a parent like had rules, you know. Then you get married. Or you're raised in a home and there was a lot of fighting. That's all you saw. You're raised in a home and there was no fighting. Both of them aren't good because you can't teach your kids how to do it the right way. So we're nothing alike, male, female. And we come from different backgrounds. Got to get used to that. And then our personalities. So the reason this is so important is because I find that more than how we were raised, and more than our gender differences, the things, laying the Lord just to the side for a moment, because He's the one that wired us the way we are, the thing that seems to really define a marriage as great, of course, Jesus is the key. Don't ever not hear me say that. But the thing that defines the best marriages and the worst marriages is the ability to accept and understand each other's personalities. They say that it takes 10 or 15 years to try to stop your partner to be like you. 10, 15 years. Some of you are going, how about 30, 40? Yeah, go ahead. Did you ever hand up back there?
No, I'm still killing a fly.
I have never heard that answer in my life. You people are creative, let me tell you. Killing a fly. Okay, so I'll just give you a heads up. This personality profile. By the way, does anybody remember, those of you that have been Christians a long time, remember Florence Littauer?
Yeah.
Okay. Florence Littauer and her husband, who I've interviewed on the radio before the Lord took them home, developed a concept called Wired That Way, and it's just like, for those of you who have anybody ever take a personality profile before? In college or in a church or for a job? Well, this is their material, goes back years. Florence Littauer. And her daughter Marita has carried on the ministry. So the concept was not formulated by believers, but it's really refreshing to see a believer write on it. So theirs is called Wire That Way, and it's from the Littauers. So it's Christian information. Okay? And you'll fill this out, and by the time you come to the training, you will know exactly who you are. But it may not make any sense. Because I have 4 different colors, red, blue, green, yellow, based on the colors of the book. And I always go for the top 2 because that kind of defines, we're kind of a rainbow, or a little mix of everything, you know. But generally we have 2 that stand out, and that defines who you are as a husband and a wife, or a man or a woman. Okay? So I will spend the time, once we find out who you are, talking about the strengths and the weaknesses of personalities that have your color, and then how to connect with your spouse that's maybe a totally opposite color, usually we are, or even anyone else in your life, the workplace as well, and what not to do. What not to do. Then I'll end with just this little promo. So if you leave, you'll get a little flyer, and then you have to call the Dove. All the information's there. Pam already signed up. So did Courtney.
Cecile.
Yeah, Cecile, they signed up already. And so you have to call the Dove, all the information's on it to sign up. And it's a blast. The one thing I can say about it, it's very accurate, very educational, but you'll probably laugh more than you should. It is flat out fun.
Yeah, it is.
Now, let me just say, give you one illustration about why this is important for people to understand other people that are not like them. We're supposed to love people that are not like us and understand them. Sometimes you want to kill them, but we have to understand them and know how to talk with them and treat them. So my wife and I, Jenny, dated for 2.5 years. And I'll just tell you now, it doesn't mean anything to you now, but she's a course polar opposite from me. She is a blue-red, and I'm a yellow-green. Polar opposites. Okay? That's all I need to know. We're usually polar opposites. Seems like a sick joke God played on us, but it's to teach us how to sacrificially love our spouse. This isn't just for marriage, this is for everybody. So 2 months before we got married, my wife says, there's something I have to share with you. And I said, that is a really good thing, honey, because we're getting married in 2 months. What do you want to share? She goes, well, as a blue, she's blue, introvert. I'm an extrovert. We'll talk about introverts being married with extroverts. I can't go and go and go like you. And I said, what do you mean? For 2.5 years, that's all we've done. We've gone here, we've gone there, we've had so many things to do and so much fun. And now you're telling me 2 months before marriage, that's not who you really are? That's called false advertising, Jenny. So anyhow, she said, no, I really need to explain to you who I really am. I mean, of course we did all that and we enjoyed it, but she goes, I think you really need to hear this before you say I do. That was brilliant, by the way. Brilliant. You know, it is said, and I will get to the text here in a minute. It is said, women hope they can change their man after marriage and never do. And men hope that their girlfriend after marriage never changes, and they do. Let's just think about it. Let that settle in. So Jenny says, okay, I got to tell you this. I said, well, if you can't go like me, because I'm extrovert, she's introvert, what do you, explain it to me. She goes, well, like if we spent the weekend visiting your family, had a great time, and then we come back to Medford, and then we go to a barbecue and end up at a movie, I can't continue to do that. I go, what do you mean? That's what we've done. Well, it's because of this, Bill. I need regrouping time. Now, I don't even know what that means. What in the world does regrouping time mean? Now, everybody that's an introvert knows exactly what it means. Who knows what it means?
Quiet.
What does it mean?
Quiet time.
Quality time with yourself.
Quality time with yourself. Quiet, yes?
Also time to decompress.
Time to decompress. Yes, something she needs that I apparently don't. Okay. I go, you need regrouping time. She goes, yes. I go, so what do you do like when we come for a busy weekend? And what do you do? She goes, well, I go home. And she says, and she was a nurse for 37 years, so I gotta kind of, and she goes, she goes like this. I just have to, I go, what does this mean? This is what this means to a woman. I just need to just chill. I go, do you play music? No. Do you watch TV? No. I just.
You need to spend time with yourself.
Yeah, and I don't even know what she's talking about. She sounded like Chinese to me. So I said, yes.
I'm an introvert.
Oh, you're a double introvert.
Yes.
Okay.
And for me, if I'm, like with my son, if I'm going, he's just on the run all the time. I've gotten where I can sit and crochet and be in my comfort zone.
Wow.
And I can do that for hours
That's amazing.
without it bothering me.
That is amazing.
But since I'm a phlegmatic primarily,
Yes, I know exactly.
everything just kind of
You just relax.
falls off the blood, off my back.
Yeah, she just lets, so you're probably a blue
And
green.
then, I'm a melancholy.
Oh, that's what you are, you're a blue green.
Yeah.
Those are both introverts, yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You know, I've never had a conversation with you, and so you're not acting like an introvert now. You just spoke right up. I'm proud of you.
Well, as you were saying, I want to talk to you and Steve about some things.
Well, now, now that you're on a roll, okay, we can talk. We'll talk.
Okay.
All right.
To start out with, my family settled the Rogue Valley back in the 1850s.
Oh my gosh.
I'm fourth generation, the family name was Gocher. And they settled in the Applegate Valley in Williams.
I know another family that settled in the Applegate Valley in Williams, and they're called the Applegates.
I don't know them personally.
Yeah, I've met them.
But my great grandfather was a Blodgett, his name is Blodgett, and you probably
I know
heard that
Blodgett.
name.
He's an attorney, yeah.
Yeah. My dad, who was raised in Oregon, in Williams, last name is Kaufman, so I go by my maiden name.
I see.
And my grandfather, George E. Kaufman Sr., was from either South Carolina or Georgia.
Okay.
There's a whole lot of people with the Kaufman name.
Were they all introverts too?
Huh?
Were they all introverts as well?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay. Can I pick this up with you? I want to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's very, very fascinating. Did you know this about her? Did she? Oh, yeah. Very good. So let me just finish what I was saying, and then I want to talk to you after.
Okay.
Regarding Jenny, because this is my point. I said, well, I know you're different than me, Jenny, and I know that you need regrouping time, but let me ask you a few questions. Number one, how long does this regrouping thing last? Real sensitive, isn't it? Then I said, these are three questions. We still laugh at these questions. I actually ask these questions. You're probably thinking, I'm amazed that she married you. But the second question was, and how do I know when it's over? When you're regrouping things over, can you let me know? Because I can't, I don't even understand it. But the last question we laugh at the most, and that was, and by the way, when you're regrouping as an introvert, like what do you look like when you go through it? Anyhow, that's just a little smidgen of what we teach and so on and so forth. So if there's anyone in your family or that you work with or relatives that you have in your life who you forever have wanted to better understand and connect with or talk with without getting in a disagreement, you want to come to this. Okay? Yeah.
Okay, for those people who aren't gonna be here, but would love to, is it gonna be streamed? Is there any way to pay and watch it at a later time or participate somewhat?
I don't think it'll be streamed,
Okay,
but I do have a DVD of it that I did at Trail that maybe I can put in your hands to look at if you can't be here. Just remind me. Okay? All right, so now back to the good stuff. 1 Samuel chapter 17. We started with a series on David. Are you all too warm or are you perfect? Are you warm? Who's warm? Oh, okay. Because I'm boiling up, but I got a fan right above me. Okay, 1 Samuel 17. This is called Facing Our Fears. Yes. I have a fan right here. I have one. What's that?
Do you want the fan off?
No. I want it on. Matter of fact, I want it on a little Face Center Fears. Years ago, when I was on the Dove Radio, I used to interview authors all over the country, Christian authors, about their book, their latest book, and then I would try to promote it to the audience and so on and so forth. And I was interviewing Eldridge, John Eldridge. You ever hear that name before? He's written several books. John Eldridge. It was an honor to interview him. And I think I told this story when I first started teaching here, but I went through a horrible divorce, very unwanted divorce, after 3 kids in 20 years of marriage. And so I was pretty broken up. And after I went through the divorce, I met Jenny. And Jenny and I had helped her when I was married and she was married. I had helped her through a crisis before, so I knew her kind of way back. But I was going through divorce. She had no idea. I ran into her one day, and she's a nurse, and I had lost 25 pounds. And she said she thought I had cancer. So we started talking, and I said, yeah, my wife has divorced me. And she cried with me, then sent me a card a while back. She said, you walk with me through mine, and I'm here if you need me. So we started talking on the phone. And then 2.5 years later, we got married. We've been married 20 years. So, anyhow, but when we were getting acquainted, I was on the radio, and I would have a lot of anxiety and fear. I really think I had a form of PTSD, past, post, traumatic stress syndrome. I really think I had PTSD because PTSD is simply nightmarish emotions based on where you were hurt before. Okay. And so this particular day and I couldn't make up my mind if I wanted to keep dating or pull back. I was just confused, really confused. So this particular morning when I went on the Dove, my interview was with John Eldridge. I had no idea what he was going to talk about, except maybe one of his books, but I didn't know which one. And so I sit down, and I have butterflies, and just my gut is wrenching with anxiety. Anybody ever feel that before? And so he says this. He said, Bill, do you know that a lot of Christian men struggle with fear? I said, really? No, do tell me. He said, well, yes, I find that a lot of Christian men, that doesn't mean women don't, but it's a man-to-man thing, and his book is written to men. You know? He said, and what I find is frequently God will call a man right into the middle of a fear experience because that's his will for them. I said, excuse me? He said, oh yeah. There were a lot of things that men would avoid. And I was avoiding the notion of maybe getting engaged because I had so much trauma from the divorce. But men have a tendency to run in the opposite direction, which is what I would do. But he goes, what I have found is frequently if you're facing a fear experience or a situation where the odds are against you and you just don't know how to trust anybody, when God's calling you, he's actually calling you to walk through the fear experience with him. And more times than not, it's actually his will for you to walk into the fear. I said, excuse me, are you telling me, and I'm feeling it right when I'm talking about it, are you telling me that more times than not, well, sometimes it's not God's will to go into a frightful place, But are you telling me that more times than not, if a man has fear in his heart and anxiety about a decision, more times than not, that's exactly the direction they should go into because it's God's will? And he said, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And my anxiety stopped that day, got engaged with Jenny 6 months later, and we've been married 20 years. So this story in the Old Testament is kind of like one of the most colorful stories about facing fear and how to get through it. David and Goliath. It doesn't get better than that. Okay, so let's jump right in. And we'll start at verse 17. Now, last week I talked about David's childhood and how he was raised, which is very interesting, in a home that wasn't that comfortable for him. Anybody remember why? Why it wasn't that comfortable? David? He had some brothers that didn't like him very well. And they're pretty hard on him. What did his father think about him? Remember? Well, his father loved him, but he was the youngest brother and he was keeping the father's sheep. And as the story went on, Samuel's looking for a new king to replace Saul because he disobeyed the Lord. And so he approaches Jesse, David's father, who has 8 sons. And the prophet says, I want you to go to the household of Jesse. He has 8 sons, and one of them will be anointed as king. Now, in those days, it was usually the eldest brother, or the tallest and the strongest brother. The kings of those days were tall, dark, and handsome, and they came from very wealthy lineage. But this time, Samuel ran through all 7 of David's older brothers, and he didn't choose any of them. And so then he asked Jesse, do you happen to have any more sons? Because God's not chosen any of these. He goes, yeah, I do, but he's the youngest, and he's out tending sheep. It's like, he didn't even name his name. I have a youngest son, he's out tending sheep. And Samuel said, we're not going anywhere till you go and bring him here to me. So you can all relax for a minute. I want to meet the 8th son. Comes in. Jesse looks at him and he says, the Lord has chosen this one. He's about 17 years old. Now, he didn't become a king for a while. We'll get into that. So his brothers didn't like him, as we'll kind of see, because when David showed up to face Goliath, which the older brothers hid from, as well as King Saul, who was head and shoulders in height above everyone else in the land. And he was petrified of Saul. So when David kind of questions his brothers, because he brought them food on the front line, about this king who's blaspheming God and God's army, one of the brothers said, you came down here just to insult us, didn't you? You came down here to mock us, didn't you? We'll read that later. So that's where we pick it up. Let's read chapter 17. We'll do a few verses at a time. David and Goliath. Now the Philistines, by the way, this was the #1 army that King Saul was supposed to take down as a part of his role as king. The Philistines. They were mean people. And God wanted them off the face of the earth. So King Saul had one role: destroy the Philistines with my people. Now the Philistines gathered at their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Socoh, which belongs to Judah. So they're actually living in a Jewish town, which is pretty bold to come into God's territory, and they're staying there. And encamped in between Socoh and Azekah, and it goes on. Verse 2. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in line of battle against the Philistines. Now let me just paint a picture. This place is still there. I've been there twice in the last 6 years. It's called the Valley of Elah. It's 15 miles from Bethlehem. Okay? And it's a big, wide valley. And it has some pretty steep ravines. And there's a riverbed in that valley. It's still there. And so, both times that I went to Israel with the people at Trail, they let me tell this story standing in that valley. It was awesome. Now, by the way, we'll see that when David was in that valley and he's confronted by Goliath, he picked up 5 stones. Does anybody know why he picked up 5 when he only needed to use 1? Because he had 4 brothers. I think a gospel preacher said that one time, and we all remember. So when I was there, just a little sidebar, at that time I had 5 granddaughters. I have 7 now, no grandsons. I have 7 granddaughters. Ages 3 months to 18, and a lot of conversation in between. And so I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick up 5 stones, and I'm going to bring them back to my granddaughters and tell them they should never be afraid and have courage. I was so happy. Papa brought back 5 stones. Then when I went to Israel again, the tour guide told us, see all those white stones? Those are trucked in. I went, no!
It's still been there.
Of course they are. Of course.
It's still been there.
Yeah. But they could have looked like that, and I know that. Yeah. Just a little sidebar. And so, long valley, big wide valley. So on one of the cliffs or slopes are encamped the Philistines, and it's probably about 3 miles wide. And the other side were the Israelites. Now, Pastor Rick Boya, some of you know his name. He's the pastor of Trail. He's retired, like I am. And he's been there 12, 13, 14 times. He does tours there. He teaches every place we go to, he knows about. And so we're standing, and there's a hill right behind us. And we read that what David would do while this battle was starting to begin, or at least Goliath was calling down the Israelites and they were petrified, is David's father said, I want you to, he's 15 miles away in Bethlehem, I want you to bring your brothers food. He brought him 10 different types of cheeses. It actually says 10 different cheeses. That was a little bit of work. And a bunch of other food for the brothers. And he says, I want you to check out the brothers and see how they're doing. So David would go back and forth to Bethlehem to bring his brothers food and go back and forth. And so I asked Rick, Pastor Rick, which way did he come from? He turned around and he said, see the part of the hill right there? That's straight across from Bethlehem. He came down that exact hill. I went, oh my gosh. Like, is that all? Amazing. So the place is still there. Let's read on. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain the other side with a valley between them. Okay? And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath. And the word champion there means in the middle, which will make sense in a moment. He was a champion. He was as if he was their God, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. Now, what does your Bible explain as far as the height for that? 9 feet, 9 inches. Now, a common ceiling, help me guys, if you're in construction, well, you would know, Courtney. What is the common height of a standard ceiling? 8 feet. Okay. So you think of your ceiling in the home, unless you have a real high one, that's 8 feet. So add another 1 foot 9 inches to that, and that's how tall he is. He's a big dude. Now we've had people, people that play in the NBA basketball. We've had some from Korea and China, maybe 7'8", 7'9", but this guy's really big. Okay, let's continue on. He had a helmet of bronze. I knocked my notes over. And occasionally I need them. You don't want me to go without them. Okay. So this guy is one big guy, and he's very intimidating. And intimidation doesn't go well with people that have a lot of fear and anxiety. We don't do well with people that are intimidating. Okay? It doesn't help. And so we read that this guy came out, 9'9", Goliath of Gath, and he had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. So a coat of mail was a bronze coat of mail, which weighed less than steel, and they were like fish scales. So you've probably seen armies and Romans and things like that, where their breastplate was just little pieces of bronze, because it weighed less than full body armor. They could move better, okay? And so that he had on him weighed 125 pounds. Like, I know there's some of you are heroic, and maybe in your younger days or whatever, you used to go backpacking, but can you imagine 125 pounds packing all the time? Well, this is just what the guy was wearing as a breastplate. So he was pretty strong. And he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels, which is 125 pounds. And he had a bronze armor on his legs, so his legs were covered, and a javelin of bronze sling between his shoulders. So he had 2 big long leather straps with a javelin stuck in between his back. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam. Now, ladies, what is a weaver's beam? That's where you do sewing and you make things, right? The weavers. So I guess I would suppose it's a beam that holds the top of the weaver.
I think it's the thing that you pull down.
You pull down.
Tight.
Oh, okay, tight.
Yeah.
If they had a loop, they had to shoot the string or whatever.
Okay. Okay, well this spearhead, the shaft of the spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead weighed 600. So just the tip of the spear weighed 25 pounds. The spearhead, 25 pounds. And that was made out of metal. And so the tip of metal is very, very sharp, and it lasts a long time. Okay. And his shield bearer went before him. And so he had a grown man that probably also had a sword and a spear, or carried his, and ran in front of him. Okay? He stood and shouted at the ranks of Israel. Now this is what Goliath is doing. So these men are already petrified, as you'll see. But now he comes in front of everybody, intimidates all of them. There wasn't a one of them that stood up. They hid. King Saul, who was supposed to be the one to go against them, was hiding in his tent. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle?" And the reason he said that is because they didn't charge the Israelites. They were just there, and the Israelites prepared for battle. So he's kind of mocking them like, are you kidding me? Because the Israelites weren't trained in battle. They were not military people. With God on their side, they won many battles. But they didn't know it. Matter of fact, earlier on, the Israelites used to have their weapons made by the Philistines. So this guy's laughing at him like, what? Are you kidding me? So he says, why have you come up to draw for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you are not servants of Saul? Are you not servants of Saul? Then he says, choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he's able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And so that's what they did in those days. Rather than wipe out 1,500 soldiers, they just chose a man to represent them. So this representation of the Philistines is 9'9", biggest, ugliest dude you've ever seen in your life. And then the one that's supposed to represent Israel, tall, dark, and handsome, hiding in his tent. And the men are left out there to listen to this guy babble for 40 days in a row. Twice a day. Can you imagine that? Twice a day, intimidating and threatening God's people as fear creeped over their soul. Let's read on. Verse 10. And the Philistines said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Give me a man. Any man. And he says that you win will be your servants, which wasn't true because they won and the Philistines ran for their life. And if we won, you'll be our servants forever. So it's better to have one person die than 1,500. Verse 11, when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Greatly afraid. I mean, you can see why. But the moral of this story is that our confidence is in God, no matter what the outward circumstances are. Do not be intimidated by any outward circumstance in life. God is the victor. That's the whole point of this story, as you'll see. Verse 12. Now David was the son of an Ephraimite, Bethlehem in Judah, named Jesse. He had 8 sons. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. The 3 oldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to the battle. We talked about this last week. So David had 7 brothers. 3 of them had to be over 20, 21 years of age, because to this day, you need to be, I thought it was 21. I read 20. You have to be, even today in Israel, every man 20 or 21 must go to the military. There's no option unless they become a scribe or a priest. That's it. You're going to be in the Israeli army. Period. Okay? So his brothers had to be over 20, 21, and the rest of the brothers were probably in their late teens, early teens. The 3 eldest sons of Jesse followed Saul to the battle. David was too young to be in the battle. He actually wins the battle, and he was too young to be in it. And the names of these 3 sons went to battle: Eliab, that firstborn, Abinadab, and Shammah. David was the youngest. I said that last week. He must have been so sick of hearing his father and his brothers telling him he's the youngest. He was the runt of the litter. Remember last week I said the litter of the runt? He was just a little dude. Go back to the smelly sheep. This is too much for you. That's their attitude. The 3 eldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to lead his father's sheep at Bethlehem. Now listen to this. For those of you that have current fear, current intimidation and anxiety, listen to this. For 40 days the Philistine came forward and took his stand morning and evening. So think about this. You're supposed to be in battle. This guy shouts, curses God's name, and intimidates God's people 80 times. 2 times a day. And nobody stood up. They all hid. They all hid. So, no battle. No fear experience, right? I mean, I think we all get a little bit of anxiety. But no fear experience should take away our peace. According to this story. Like, this story should settle it for all of us. It won't, but it should. Okay. 17. See, what am I going to do without you? If I go to another church and they don't know my spaciness like you do, and they don't tell me the verse, I'm just going to go, hello? Okay. Okay. And Jesse, verse 17, said to David his son, take for your brothers an ephah and this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp for your brothers. Also, take these 10 cheeses. I mean, I love that. This is not a myth. It's not a fable. It's not pretend. It's very detailed. Take them these 10 cheeses. Probably from the sheep, right? There's goat milk, sheep milk, cheeses. Yeah. And to the commander of the 1,000, and see if your brothers are well, and bring some token for them. Bring a token to them. See, so what happened in those days is, as the soldiers went out, their families were responsible to bring them food. That's why this was a common run for David. And if they won the battle, they would be awarded a token or money for the victory and for all of the sacrifices they made to bring the family food. So they would get a token if they won the battle, which they did. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines, and David rose early in the morning and left the sheep with the keeper and took the provisions and went. 15 miles. How long does it take to really, I mean, if you were a good hiker, 15 miles, rolling hills, 4 hours. Maybe 4 hours. He's 17. Maybe he ran a little bit too. 4 hours each way. So he had to get up pretty early then. I mean, if the battle started at 9, this guy was up at 5 or 4 in the morning, gathering all the stuff, and he's hoofing it over these hills. And by the way, the timing is perfect. Right about the time he gets there, out walks Goliath. And David hears it just in time. I mean, God's timing is perfect on every level and in every instance. Have you found that to be true? Okay. So David rises early. He leaves the sheep with the keeper. He takes provisions, and Jesse commanded him. And he came to the encampment as the host was going out to battle the line. So I don't know why they call him the host, but or maybe the host was to blow a trumpet. Who knows who the host is? I don't know. Shouting the war cry. Okay, it was someone that shouted the war cry. Okay. And Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. And David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage and ran to the ranks where he greeted his brothers. So David has all these bags that he's carrying on this 15-mile hike. Leaves them with another servant and runs to where they're lined up for battle, the front line. He goes, I got to hear this. And then he sees this cyclops of a guy coming across the field, really big, and he goes, I got to see this. 17-year-old. And he went to greet the brothers. And as he talked with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before, and David heard him. I know that Goliath regretted that David heard him. David heard what he'd been saying 79 other times, because that's the last time he said it.
Bill, do we actually know what size David was? How tall or?
You know, I don't think he was outlandishly tall. Now, the Bible does say that he was very good looking and he had clear skin. Might have had either reddish skin or kind of a reddish bronze hair, but nothing said about his height. Said that he was good looking, he had beautiful eyes, but he had the heart of a lion, as we'll see. Verse 24. All the men of Israel, when they saw the man, Goliath, fled from him and were much afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel, and the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. In other words, whoever is bold enough to go against this man that defies God's army is going to receive great wealth, get the king's daughter, which David did get, and the best of all, no more taxes. I would have killed him just for that. No more taxes. And so they're talking about this, like, is anybody bold enough? I mean, you get a beautiful wife who's royalty, all kinds of money, and you don't have to pay taxes. Nobody stands up. Nobody comes forward. Okay? Verse 26. And David said to the men, he's in this conversation now, he's hearing what they're talking about, who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? He is not only insulting God's people, he is insulting God, the creator of the universe. So what did you say? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine? And he's emphasizing he's not a Jew. He's the enemy. He doesn't believe in God's covenant. If you believe in God's covenant and family and promises, you're circumcised. When you're a young boy, In their case, they got circumcised as men, which was very difficult, I'm sure. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Like, why isn't anybody doing anything? Fear. Fear. And lack of trust in God's ability. Verse 27, and the people answered him in the same way, so shall it be done for this man. So you get his wife, you get his daughter, you get money. You don't pay taxes, which David probably didn't know much about that anyway. He was 17. Verse 28, now Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those, get this, few sheep? It's like you're a nobody. You're the baby of the family. You have a little measly job with a few stinky sheep. Why are you here? As he's hiding behind brush, knocking his knees, as the older brother. Now, why would he be so angry about that? What do you think? Why is he doing this to David?
David's questioning their manhood or manhood.
As he should.
He's not afraid.
Yeah, he's not afraid, not at all, boy.
Nobody likes to be made to look bad.
Yeah, especially in front of your little brother. So he's furious because he knows that he's afraid. So are his other two brothers. And his little brother is saying, nobody's going to do anything? And so he says, and with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption in the evil of your heart, for you've come down to see the battle. Yeah. But listen to David's reply. I love it. And David said, what have I done now? Was it not but a word? And he turned away from him toward another and spoke the same way, and the people answered him as before. So here's a picture. Sometimes our greatest intimidators can be relatives. And usually those kind of relatives, I mean, it's deep inside of us. Deep. And it goes way back. And sometimes, even as adults, we still can't stand up to them as intimidators to this day. And the Lord doesn't want that for us. Doesn't want it. He wants us to trust Him and be people of courage. That doesn't mean you have to go outside and take them down. But He doesn't want us to be intimidated by anybody for any reason. He wants us to trust that He is the King and the battle is His. He just does His victory through us. So, as we prepare for Thanksgiving, those are times when sometimes we run into some of our relatives again, or friends, or whatever, and old memories come up. Don't be intimidated. The Lord's there for you. I remember as a young pastor, I was a senior pastor of a church in Eureka. I've told you about that. And when I went there, my senior pastor, he would send us out as college students to either start or take over other small churches. So I went there, and my pastor then said, Billy, because I was just 29, just preach your heart out. There's a couple of elders there, they're businessmen, let them deal with everything. You just preach your heart out. Let them do the business, you just preach your heart out. So I preached my heart out. And then we eventually got a church, bought a church, invested in a big church, and there was a lot of problems with the elder and the contractor. That's all I can tell you. A lot of problems. And the elder was inappropriate too. The elder was inappropriate. And so he was kind of like a father figure to me, but he was inappropriate. And he lost his qualifications for being an elder. Now, the only one that's going to tell him was me. And he was like a dad. So I just never forget, I was so intimidated by him that I had to call him and his wife in and tell him that he's no longer an elder because of what he did. And it was probably the biggest challenge of my life. That was the first time I stepped over the line of intimidation. First time. So we all have those giants in our life. We have those giants in our life. Okay. And by the way, anytime in a family or a marriage or a close relationship, someone says, "What have I done now?" What does that mean? We all know what that means. When someone says, exasperated, "What have I done now?" What does that mean?
Whoops, they overstepped the boundaries.
They've overstepped the boundaries, but what else does it mean?
Somebody's been nagging at him.
Nagging, critical for years maybe. And then finally you go, like, what is it this time? Save your criticism. What is it this time? Well, so that tells you what the relationship is like. So David was pushed around, I'm telling you. And then he says, I only said one word. And so what I'm very proud of David for is he not only takes down the giant with the power of God, but he finally stood up to his oldest brother, who was the other giant in his life. He had a couple of them. He takes down Goliath, and he also took down his brother. But don't you ever talk to me that way again. Well, David's ready to go out, and this guy's hiding behind a bush. Okay. 31. Thank you very much. Okay. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and Saul sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him." So David's telling this king that is head and shoulders over all of the other men in Israel. David's telling him, like he just called out his brother, let no man's heart fail because of him. That's what God says to us. Don't let your heart fail because of a person. Ever. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. I'll do it. I'll be the one. And Saul said to David, "You are not able." Now that's a shame. He's the one who wasn't able. "You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father." This is one of the best verses in the chapter. Your servant used to be, well, he's still a shepherd, but he used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. I mean, who kills a bear and a lion with their bare hands? Someone who the power of God is on. You can't do that as a human. Not only struck him down, he went after him, by the way. So the picture is, it could have been at nighttime, they came into the herd, took the lamb, David chased them down and struck them and killed them. Took the lamb out of their mouth, put it back where it belonged. Then he says, "And if he arose against me," in other words, if they attacked him, so there are probably times that lions and bears attacked him, and there was times where he had to chase them down. "And if he came against me, I caught him by his beard," so that had to be the lion, right? Do bears have beards? I don't think so.
I mean,
No,
Yeah, a lion would have a mane or a beard, yeah. Caught him by the beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears. Those are plural. These are not single events. Yes?
I should say that this is the beard, it doesn't matter whether it has hair on it or not. He's basically saying he grabbed him by the jaw.
Okay, so it could be the bear too.
Yeah.
Bear, lion, beard, jaw. Okay. And this he goes, so I've taken down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you. I have a name for Saul that I won't use in church.
coward.
Yeah, coward. Coward's the best. Same thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that didn't come to my mind. Thank you very much. You bailed me out again. Now listen to what Saul does now. This guy needed to be slapped. Then Saul clothed David with his armor. So he said, okay, if you're going to go take out this Philistine, you wear my armor. Now what I read today at the commentary is that if you wore someone else's armor, they were assigned as the victor as well. So if David would have taken down Goliath wearing Saul's clothing, Saul would have got the praise for it. There's that word that comes to my mind again, that coward. Okay. So he clothes David with his armor. He puts the helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. So I can see David, with his helmet drops down to his nose. And he's trying to walk around in this stuff, and it's clinging and clanging, and he can't do it. But what was he instead? Where was he most comfortable, David? Slinging a stone. Right on the hillside where the sheep were. Slinging a stone. Every boy's dream. Slingshots. And David strapped his sword over his armor, and he tried to go in vain, but he did not test them. And David said to him, I can't go with these, for I have not tested them. So David put them off. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones, the ones I thought I had, from the brook, and he put them in the shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. So he walked towards Goliath. And as he gets going, he actually runs towards Goliath. Let's read it. And the Philistine moved forward and came near David with his shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy and handsome. That means nice-skinned, good-looking, handsome in appearance. And the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field. Now that had to sound intimidating. Had to. But David knew the battle wasn't his. How do you think he knew that?
Well, we already said that God had already saved him from bears and lions. I think he already knew God.
That's exactly right. So when God wants us to face our intimidators, he wants to us to remember the last time that he gave us courage and faced our intimidators. So we've got to pull back on those strings of memory when God got us through the last time. That's what David does. I'm not afraid of this guy. I already took down lions and bears because of the power of God. Why would I be even concerned with this guy?
Would he kind of be knowing God had something bigger for him, and he was gonna get him through this, because he was already in one?
Yeah, and God, and by the way, that's very well said, because what is God trying to do with this man? He's trying to give him the heart of a king. And kings don't hide in their tents. They lead the charge. Because their trust is in the Lord, because the battle is the Lord's. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. By the way, a few chapters before this, the Philistines area, they worship a god named Dagon. And you read earlier in 1 Samuel that they had the Ark of the Covenant there. And they were worshiping Dagon, and all of a sudden Dagon fell to the ground and his head rolled off. Meaning that their king and their god was defeated. Now David's going to take off another head to second it. Philip, verse 41. No, verse
46.
46.
46.
Okay, verse 46. Oh yeah, this day the Lord will deliver you in my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head, and I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, and that all of the earth may know there is a God. So he's already predicting, you're not only going down, there's going to be dead bodies everywhere that are Philistines. And that all his assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear. He doesn't need your 25-pound javelin spearhead. I have a slingshot. It's because of God's power and the battle's his. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And I only have 4 minutes, so I'm just going to read. And when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to David, David ran quickly towards the battle. He runs towards him, not from him. Ran toward the battle line to meet the Philistine, and David put his hand in the bag and took out a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face on the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David. He didn't even have a sword. So he had to use the Philistine sword to cut his head off. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and killed him and cut off his head. With it the Philistines saw their champion was dead, and they fled. And then the children of Israel ran after them and started taking them all down. Now, this is not a story primarily about David and Goliath. This is a story of our sovereign God who rules the universe, makes no mistakes considering the battles we have to go through in life, or any odds that are against us. So some of us here, we feel that there's odds against us. It could be physical problems, it could be divorce, it could be, finances, it could be threats from other people. This story is about the God, the sovereign God of the universe, who loves his people and will fight for them. All we need to do is just trust him to handle it and to come through for us. That's all he's asking. So I'll just end with this. Who's your Goliath? It could be marriage. It could be a rebellious son. It could be an intimidating neighbor. Boy, I hope I never have to live next to an intimidating neighbor. God might do it now that I'm talking about it. But we don't walk alone. He's our champion. He's the one that is the mediator that stands in the middle between us and God. So whatever fear you have, I mean, memorize this chapter. Because there's no better in the scripture about how God helps us through our fears, because the battle is His. Amen? Lord, we thank you for this. Some of us, there's times when we wake up at 2 in the morning and we have anxiety and we try to figure things out, and after we pour our heart out to you, you're very gracious to help us get back to sleep. But will you please continue to have mercy on us and teach us to trust you, the God we cannot see but lives within. Help us, Lord, to always trust you against the odds that we face that seem absolutely impossible to overcome. You love us. You sent your Son to die for us. And the battle is yours. Help us all to remember that as we go out into this cold world again, trusting you to protect us in all ways. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. God bless.